Teresa. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all here today. Thank you for coming. Just showing up today takes a special kind of courage to be brave enough to take a look inside of yourself, inside of your relationship. And we are doing that with ferocity today, fierce intimacy. Into me you see is a great way to think about intimacy. Opening up your own heart, your own life, your own relationship to really see what it looks like and to take full responsibility for our part in it. And so Terry says intimacy is not something that you have, it's something that you do. And I know for myself, I have spent a lot of time working on my relationships and I have a lot of doing, a lot of striving and trying but I was not doing the right things. I was doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. And I thought if I just tried harder at these things, then I would have the intimacy that I was looking for. But it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a fierce, intimate look into our relationships to see what is our pattern, what is our dance, why is it not working, and how can we actually learn what to do so that we can have the intimacy that we're looking for in our relationships. And it can be in our intimate sexual relationships, or it can be with our parent-child relationships, or any intimate relationship in our life we can apply this to. So before we get started, first things first, I just need to address this because I really have been studying relationships and anything to do with marriage and how to get along with your partner and how to show up in a healthy way, healthy boundaries, all kinds of things for since I was about 25 years old, 3 kids, teaching marriage seminars at 25. I mean, this is my passion. I have been immersed in this and I've read every book under the sun about these things, marriage and relationships. And every single book, I promise you, every single one has this little caveat, this little paragraph that says, by the way, nothing that you're going to learn in this book or program will work if these preconditions for intimacy are not met. If you have something, one of these things going on in your relationships, intimacy is not possible. And I would just skip over that. Oh, well, okay, well, that shouldn't matter. But actually, this really does matter. So I want everyone just to take a moment to pay attention to this. If we have these preconditions are not met, we cannot have the relationship we're looking for. If there's mental illness, mental health is huge. We have a huge mental health crisis in our world right now. But if there's mental health issues like a personality disorder, imagine so borderline where somebody is constantly in highs and lows, extreme rage or depression, and can't regulate themselves. If there's bipolar, for example, where it's not every moment to moment but maybe week by week, there's a high and there's a low, there's not an ability to stay stable emotionally. Narcissistic personality disorder, an inability to feel empathy or to carry the feeling of guilt in a way that we can interact with each other the way that we need to for intimacy. There's lots of different personality disorders. And if we or our partner has one of those things, this won't work. In fact, the skills when you're trying to be vulnerable or show your heart to your partner in a way that would normally be healthy, if your partner has a disorder, it's not going to work. And so there's that. 2, untreated addiction. If there's addictions, even they're hidden, there could be process addictions like food addiction or sex addiction or, the smoking or alcohol, those things, of course. But if we have addiction, that takes priority over the relationship. And so these things will not work either. If there's abuse, that's the third thing. So mental health, addiction, or abuse. If there's verbal, a lot of yelling, name calling, just emotional violence, and of course, physical abuse, then these things will not work. I had all three of these things going on in my relationship for a very long time. And so nothing that I would learn worked in my relationship. So it's really, really important that if you or your partner has these things, it doesn't mean that you're bad or wrong. It just means you need help. It means that we've got to go in to get help, trauma therapy to help heal or get the tools or even medications, whatever it is that we need for the support to treat those things. And then we can work together as a couple. And so, if your partner's not able to sit through a conversation or sit through a therapy session, if they get too dysregulated, raged, or shut down, that probably means that there's something going on. And I really encourage you to get some individual help first. And then we can work on the relationship as a couple. Okay. And Terry says, number two, that's the first thing. Number two is you've got to be willing to rock the boat. So we can learn all kinds of things. We can learn all kinds of tools and skills, but if we're not willing to stand up with love for our relationship, for the intimacy that we want, if there's no bottom line in our relationship, then our partner may not want to ever do the work, and we may never ever see change if we're not willing to hold some kind of bottom line. Unconditional love is not unconditional tolerance. Sometimes we confuse the two. Tolerating abuse or tolerating isolation and loneliness and all these things in our relationship because we think we're loving, that's not unconditional love. That's just tolerating something that's not intimacy. It's not. So be willing to draw a line, be willing to stand up with love for your relationship, stand up for yourself and for your partner together to fight for what you really want, which what we're designed for as human beings is intimacy and connection. And so those are what Terry says are important to know right away before we even get started. Those are important. Okay, so now I've said those. Now we can get into the presentation. So um, we've learned many things, I'm sure, over the years as we have been in a relationship with another person. We try to learn skills and tools and how to listen and how to reflect back, but really there is a part of us that ends up taking over when things all of a sudden get heated or all of a sudden we feel flooded or triggered and we can't use any of those skills and tools and things that we've learned. So what Terry deals with in relational life therapy, and he writes in all of his books, it's that part of you that won't listen to any of those skills or that knows to do better but doesn't. That's the part that we're going to talk about today. And Terry calls it your adaptive child. Your adaptive child. We're going to get to know all about you, all about your adaptive child and how it shows up in the relationship. And so this is here we go, that into me you see. Ready? I want everyone to get their piece of paper and their pen or pencil that they are bringing with them today. And if you don't have one, go get one real quick. We're going to do something together. Learning is better when we have more of our senses. So I'm going to do this with you. We're going to write it down on a paper today. Ready? The first thing I want you to do is write a cross on your piece of paper like that. A vertical line and a horizontal line. Okay, and now at the top, you're going to write self-esteem. At the top, self-esteem, that's the vertical line here. And then on the side, I want you to write boundaries. Okay, so it looks like this. Self-esteem and boundaries. The boundaries is this line here. Okay, ready now? Self-esteem. There's the one up and there's one down. There's going to be the self-esteem that you're going to write underneath too much. On the top, self-esteem, too much self-esteem. And on the bottom, we're going to write too little. Too little self-esteem. So then we have our line here, one up, one down, too much self-esteem, too little self-esteem. And now with boundaries, we're going to write boundaryless, so no boundaries. You can also write enmeshed if that feels better for you. So boundaryless is what the term Terry uses. Boundaryless on this side, on the right side. And on the left side, you're going to write walled off. Walled off. And this means you have a really thick wall. Thick wall. Walled off, boundaryless. Okay, that's our little chart. And in the middle, I want you to draw a circle. And in that middle, you're going to write adult. So this right here, when we have a healthy balance of self-esteem and boundaries, we show up as an adult in our relationships. We are in a healthy balance of knowing that we have value and worth, but not more than others. And we have a good sense of what we are responsible for and not responsible for, a healthy sense of control in our lives. That middle ground right there in the middle is when we are in our adult. Anything else outside of that is going to be our adaptive child. And I'm going to help you figure out which quadrant your adaptive child lands in. So what I'm going to do right now is share my screen. And I'm going to show you here. Okay, so here is a little bit more fancy version of my paper. So we have the one up and the one down. And at the top, a good word for that being one up is grandiosity. A good word for being one down is shame. And then you've got the walled off, love avoidant, and we've got the boundaryless, the love dependent. So we've got these four different things we can do. I'm going to just talk about them a little bit one at a time here. So when we get triggered, when we feel upset or get into conflict, or if we have a big emotional response to something that's happening in our relationships. Imagine your partner or your child or somebody does something that really just gets under your skin, really irritates you, something they've done so many times, you've already told them not to do it and they do it again. It's like, oh, I want you to think about how you respond with your self-esteem line first. Now, if you respond with grandiosity, you go up that line into having more esteem for yourself, a lot of power for yourself. You believe you are right and they are wrong. And you have there's a feeling of contempt for the other. Like they're the problem. They're the one, if they would just listen, if they would just do what you asked, or if, gosh, can't believe they did it again, or how could they do that? There's a feeling of contempt toward the other, which means we're putting ourselves in a higher self-esteem. We're putting ourselves as more power and one up and above the other. The other way to respond is if we go down the line, down to shame. And here's where we would feel powerless. We would feel like, oh my gosh, I messed up again. Why am I always doing this? How do I always get stuck here? Oh my gosh, being the victim, or being where we feel like, oh, we're just too sensitive, or we always mess up and do things wrong. It's our fault. We feel powerless. We feel less esteem for ourselves. So we have contempt again, but it's toward ourselves as opposed to toward the other. So Terry says that he realized either way you go, up or down, you are feeling contempt. You're feeling contempt for yourself if you're going to shame, or you're feeling contempt for the other if you go to grandiosity. Generally, we're going to have the same response more often than not toward in our intimate relationships. So think about maybe not coworkers or friends, but intimate family, spouse, the ones that are really that you're close to, the ones that really know you. How do you respond? Do you tend to go down in shame, or do you tend to go one up in grandiosity? See if you can pick one. Just for now, make a little mark. Pick one or the other. And of course, we'll all of us do both. We can go from one to the other, but which one do you spend the most time? Okay, ready? Now we're going to do the middle, the horizontal line. And this is boundaries. This is all about control. This is all about responsibility. And so if we go too far to the right and we're going to boundaryless, we are being controlling. We are taking too much responsibility. We are trying to fix or change. We're on the other person and we're focused on the other person. We're trying to maybe even fix and change ourselves, but we're taking on the burden and the load of the relationship. We have no boundaries. We're enmeshed, we're codependent. We really depend on the opinions or what the other person thinks or feels. We really want them to be different. And we are really enmeshed with them, meaning it's hard to tell the boundary between that person and myself. I want them to be happy so I can be happy. Boundaryless. Then there's going to be walled off the other direction. Walled off means you go behind a big fat emotional wall that you protect yourself behind. You shut down, you go numb, you feel separate or distant from, you like your space. You want to say, whoa, that person needs to go work on themselves. I don't have anything to do with it. That is not my problem. That is on them. I'm okay. I'm going to stay busy. I'm going to keep doing work and my important things I've got going on here and wait for them to calm down. Kind of that's the love avoidant, the walled off. So, which direction do you feel that you tend to go? One or the other? Probably most of you that are here are going to be in the boundaryless because you're doing something. You are taking responsibility. You're showing up to a webinar. So most likely you're going to be in the boundaryless, but maybe not. You could be avoidant. So just pick one, whichever one feels more you. Now you've got either the one up or one down, or the walled off or enmeshed, and you can now pick which quadrant you ended up in. So if you are one up and boundaryless, now you're in the upper right quadrant, boundaryless and one up. So circle that square, circle that quadrant. That's where you landed. If you are one up and walled off, that's your quadrant. Circle that one. You landed up there. If you go one down and boundaryless, circle that quadrant. One down and walled off, circle that one. If you don't know yet, don't worry. We're going to go into them a little more in depth so you'll be able to tell which one is yours. And I even have, we're going to put in the chat a quiz that's from Terry Real's website that you can take the relational grid quiz to know exactly which quadrant you are in. So we're going to go ready one at a time. The grandiosity, one up, walled off. This I named the elitist. This kind of gets you a sense of what a person might be. And now remember, this is when you're triggered. This is when you're upset. This is when you are in conflict and you're trying to protect yourself and you go to this quadrant. So you're not this all the time. That you're most of the time, you're a healthy, happy, compassionate, loving, curious person that you can hold that space in the middle, no problem. But when you get triggered, when you get overwhelmed, all of a sudden, when your little adaptive child takes over and none of these skills and tools and things you know you're supposed to do, when they don't work anymore and you're going into a quadrant, this is where you end up. If you are an elitist, you kind of have a feeling or energy of indifference, a little bit mean spirited, kind of passive aggressive. Imagine kind of like nose up in the air, kind of like, well, I'm right. Obviously, I'm keeping my calm. They're the ones who are freaking out and overly emotional. I know I'm right. I'm logical. I make sense. I'm just going to wait for them to like figure it out. So, this kind of like energy of this elitist. This is the quadrant here of the walled off and one up. Okay, so if you find yourself that that really works for you, circle that. Okay, next we're going to the codependent. Now this one, oops, actually I'm going to go one over. So grandiosity. We've got one up and boundaryless. So now we're still in grandiosity. Okay. We're still in one up. But now we're not walled off. Now we want to fix the situation. We want to take control of it. I call this the controller. So this is where most of the time in this category, people use their anger to intimidate, to control. They're kind of aggressive or bullying, big energy people in this quadrant. And so if you find yourself in this quadrant wanting to, you're maybe thinking like, man, if they would just listen to me, everything would be fine. That's your quadrant. Circle that one. Okay, now we'll go back to going down is codependent. Now this one is, now we're boundaryless, wanting to fix, wanting to please, wanting to do something about the situation and take responsibility, but we are one down. We're in shame. It's our fault. It's our responsibility. We don't have power. We're a victim. We're desperate to fix it. And this is manipulating too when we are trying to control the other person. I call this the codependent. We are dependent on how the other person feels about us. If they would just be happy, I could be happy. That's how the codependent feels. This is where I landed most of the time in my relationships, is in this desperation, wanting to find the solution, fix it. I'll do everything. I'll take on all the burden. I just want it to be better. I want them to be happy. That's the codependent. Okay, if that sounds like you, circle that quadrant. And last we have moving over is again in the shame, the one down, but walled off. Now we have the downtrodden, the partner that is given up, that's resigned, withdrawn, depressed. There's no point. There's nothing I can do. I have no power. I'm the victim. I can't change anything. That's the mentality of the downtrodden. And they're walled off. They're not interested in opening up or being vulnerable or doing anything or taking responsibility because maybe they've already tried or they have learned that it just doesn't work. So they're downtrodden. If that sounds like you, circle it. All right. And now we have all of it together. So by now you should have circled one of these boxes. And now let's just take a look in the middle for a moment. The middle is health, a healthy human being, an adult who has healthy self-esteem. They feel good about who they are. They don't allow themselves to be mistreated or abused, and they don't abuse or mistreat other people. In this middle space, Terry calls this full respect living. We treat ourselves and each other with respect. And so we have good boundaries in this middle space. We stay regulated. We have curiosity and compassion for our partner and for ourselves. So if you feel those energies, that means you're in your adult self. And so hopefully most of the time we find ourselves in the middle. But oftentimes we will, especially in our intimate relationships, especially in our primary sexual relationship, this is where we find our adaptive child gets the most triggered. How come with everyone else in my life, I can be totally fine and happy and regulated, but with my partner, oh my gosh, when they walk in the room, boom, I'm in my codependent. I can't help it. I'm right. My adaptive child takes over. This is how it is because it's the most intimate. And this is where we learned these different ways of coping in our childhood. We learned it in our family of origin. We did these things to stay safe, to protect ourselves, and to survive because we couldn't be in the middle. And so these are often things that we learned from our parents. Usually, we're going to model one of our parents, our mom or our father, that they're going to do one of these and we're going to model it because we like it or it works and we're more like them. So we're going to do that one. And then we often will maybe do, if we have two different parents who do different coping mechanisms, we can see that, oh, maybe I do both. I can do two different things. So you might have like a 1-2, maybe you're a codependent, you try, but then eventually you get tired and you become downtrodden, you give up, right? So maybe there's a 1-2. But this is what we learned in our family of origin. So we have compassion for these different quadrants, for these different adaptive children, whichever one you're in. There's no bad or wrong. There's just what we had to do to survive. And as I work with couples, we look at our inner children. We look at the child inside of us that had to wall off to protect themselves, or that had to be desperate to try to get attention because they didn't have it, or that they had to be controlling because nobody was going to meet their needs if they didn't. Right? These parts of us showed up for a reason. They had to be there for us to survive. But now that we're adults, now it's immature. We're still acting like a child. And a child cannot have intimacy with their partner. These adaptive children, when we're in these spaces, it's impossible to find connection. It's actually physically impossible because we're in a different part of our brain. We're in our lizard brain when we're in these different spaces. And in order to connect and find empathy and connection and safety with our partner, we have to be in our prefrontal cortex. And that means we can't do both. We have to make a choice. We have to get out of our adaptive child and come back into the middle. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want you to take your quadrant, circle it, and you're going to go into your breakout rooms. And I want you to name a time in your life that you acted out of this quadrant. Basically, like, what does it actually look like? Right? What does it look like for you to be a codependent? Name a specific situation, right? That you were like that, if that's the one that you picked, right? For me, so like um, I'll give you a quick example because it's important that we have courage to be vulnerable. So my daughter has got a new puppy and she has an apartment that is not good for a puppy and it's been tearing the place up. So she asked if I could take the puppy. And I don't want a puppy. But I took it anyways because I tend to be a codependent. And I thought, well, maybe I'll make my daughter happy and I'll do this for her. And now the puppy's tearing up my house. And I find myself being like, what am I doing by having this puppy in my house? Because I tend to take on too much responsibility to try to save and fix other people. So I recognize that in my tendency. And so then we'll talk about after the breakout rooms, we'll talk about, well, then what do I do? But first, name a time that you find yourself in your adaptive child and what does it look like, and share it with the person in your breakout room. All right, welcome back, everyone. Let's take a breath. It's not easy to out ourselves. And that's one thing I love about Terry Real. When you read his books, he uses real examples from his own life and he outs himself all the time. And I love it. And that's part of his relational life therapy modality, is to be honest with the people that you're working with as a therapist, and to the client, to be, hey, I'm human. This is what I do. Here's my quadrant, because we're all working on this together. And so I'm glad that all of you showed up and had the courage to look at yourselves today. All right, now we have our quadrant. What are we going to do about that? Let's go back to, I'm going to share my screen again. Oh, go this one. Okay. And so now we have a beautiful map, a beautiful map that tells us what direction to go to get to the middle. Because the crazy thing is, it's different based on which quadrant that you're in. So we have different tasks to get ourselves to the middle from wherever we ended up in our adaptive child. We take a different path to get to the middle than our partner might if they're in a different quadrant. Okay, so I will start with myself, the codependent. When I go boundaryless, uh, over to the right and then one down in shame, then what I have to do is do the opposite. I have to do the opposite of what I'm used to doing. Instead of doing more of what I'm used to doing, I do the opposite. So I have to come up from shame. That means I have to get more power in the relationship. I have to stand up for myself, stand up for my needs. I have to gain more of a voice in the relationship. Terry says that in order for a couple dynamic to work, we need to have the mighty need to melt and the weak need to have a voice. And so I needed to have a voice to come up from shame into the middle, to get more power, more esteem for myself, to fight for what I needed. So come up from shame, but then in from being boundaryless. So instead of focusing so much on the other person, I needed to focus more on myself. You see the little thing there? It says self. So coming in from my boundarylessness is let go of control. Stop trying to control. Stop trying to fix. And stop taking on too much responsibility. I was always trying to take on all the responsibility in the relationship, and it was exhausting. And so my task is to come up and in from the boundaryless and up from one down. So if you are in this quadrant as a codependent, I want you to draw an arrow going up and an arrow going in. And you can say more power or more esteem for to go up. And then there needs to be a focus on self going in. So that means you need to give yourself more power. Does that make sense? So write it in your quadrant. This is where you're taking notes. This is happening. Look, I wrote lots of notes on my paper. I want yours to be all filled up too. So what is your task to do as a codependent? It's to come up, to gain power, to have a voice, and to come in. Stop trying to control and fix the other person and focus on yourself and your needs and what you are responsible for, which is how you're showing up in the relationship. Try to get yourself back to the middle. Okay, and then we'll go over to downtrodden. So it's the same with the shame, right? We're going down. We need to go back up. So the downtrodden needs to find their voice. They need to come up and stop blaming themselves for everything, like they're the bad guy, they're the problem. Come up to gain more esteem for yourself. So again, draw the arrow up. You deserve love. You deserve to be treated with respect. That's important, having a voice. So if you're downtrodden, write the arrow up, and then we're going to draw the arrow going inward the other way, which is actually now focusing more on the partner. You've got to show up to the relationship. So the walled off people will close the door on intimacy. They will close themselves off to the relationship. They'll protect themselves. They had to survive their childhoods. But that is not the way to create intimacy with another adult. It won't work. It won't work. You have to be more vulnerable and take more responsibility to show up in the relationship. So if that's you, draw arrow going in and say more responsibility or more vulnerability. You've got to put down your wall. That's intimacy. You have to let the other person in, but also going up. So, but holding on to claiming your voice, your needs are important, and that you need to be respected when you do it. So that's your task as the downtrodden, going up and in. Okay, then we'll keep going up here. The walled off, and one up, right? The elitist. That person is also walled off, so they're going to have to come in. Again, they've got to be more vulnerable, more soft, more open, more curious about their partner. See, the partner, right? It says in that quadrant, the attention needs to go to the partner. They're focusing too much on preserving themselves, too much on being right and protecting, but they're not opening up enough, being vulnerable, seeing what are their vulnerable feelings underneath that wall. We have to be willing to share the vulnerable feelings that's coming in. So draw the arrow going in. Same thing if you're the elitist, you have to, that's more open, more vulnerable, put down my wall, focus on the partner. But now we've got to come down from grandiosity. If we're the walled off and one up, it means we think that we're right. We have contempt toward the other. We think they're the problem. And there is this kind of meanness or like indifference at the least. And that's not conducive for a healthy relationship. We've got to come down. And Terry says sometimes it feels like you really got to reach up there and grab that ego and pull it down into the middle, down into the middle. That means get curious about your partner. Maybe you're missing something. Be curious about their point of view. What do they need? Maybe you don't have the whole story. You might not be right. Maybe your perspective is okay, it's yours, but have you really listened to theirs? Have you really put yourself in their shoes? So, coming down from grandiosity means giving more power to the partner, more power to the partner. So, giving up your power, giving up your power, giving up your control, giving up that up in that grandiosity, coming down to the middle means giving your partner more power. Okay, so those are the two directions you have to go if you're walled off and one up. And then we come around to the last one is the controller. They've also been in grandiosity. They believe that they're right and they have the power in the relationship. They're usually the dominator. So if you're in that quadrant, you've got to pull yourself down from grandiosity. So humility, right? Humility. If you're in grandiosity, your job is to find humility, to come to that middle space of esteem. No more contempt toward your partner. And don't go all the way down into shame. I know that happens too, is sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, I've been such a jerk. Oh no, I'm so bad and terrible. And don't go into shame. Come to the middle. Just come right to that middle. We're both deserving of respect. We're both deserving to be heard. We both deserve to have a healthy, happy relationship. So come down from grandiosity. And now, if you're the controller, you have to find humility and focus on yourself. How are you showing up in the relationship? Stop trying to control the other person. The controller will always be trying to tell the other person how to be. If they would just listen to me, right? They want them to change. So stop trying to control, let go of control. Come to the middle, draw an arrow going in, right? Let go of control and focus on you. How are you showing up? Are you being kind? Are you being curious? Are you regulated? Do you have compassion for your partner and yourself? Maybe you have some things going on. What are your needs? How can you address them in a healthy way? Stop focusing on how to change the partner. So that's going in and then coming down. So now we have our specific tasks, and I hope you have written it down in your quadrant exactly what your task is to do. Now you know. For my example with my daughter, I realized I was getting upset. I was kind of going up then into the walled off and one up quadrant of like, oh, these dogs, and like, why am I, taking care of them, and why can't she do it? And this, there's contempt for the other, and there's a walled off. So I'm not saying anything to her, but I'm just in my like anger and frustration about the situation. But I was codependent to that. That was my initial response, to try to take care of and take too much responsibility to make her happy. So I can see how I went to both. Now my task is to come down and come in, or if I'm in the codependent, come up and over, right? So I find which one I'm in and I come into the middle. So now I'm in the middle. I'm curious and compassionate about my needs and hers. And I had a conversation with my daughter and I said, I understand that you guys don't have a great space for this dog right now. I can take her for a little while, but I need you to pay me for my time and effort and for taking care of her. So I'm like boarding her puppy now. That feels better to me. And it's for a time period that's limited. So it's not forever. So now I feel good. Now I feel like I'm in a healthy space in the middle. I am not taking too much responsibility, but I've taken enough and I've come up from being down. Or I've come down from being up. I'm right in that middle ground now of feeling like I've taken care of my needs. I've been kind and compassionate, but I didn't allow myself to take on too much or be mistreated or be a codependent. So I've really been able to come to the middle in that example. And now I want to say this is a choice that I made. It is because of my awareness of knowing my adaptive child and my tendencies, and then feeling that frustration and going, oh, I'm not in the middle anymore. That's my responsibility. How can I get back to the middle? And so even if it's just one person in the relationship doing that, it can make a huge difference. Oftentimes when we take that time and we choose in the moment to come to the middle, our partner will then feel safe. And then they won't have to be in their adaptive child anymore because they'll sense our adult is present. And then they get to come and be in their adult as well. So really one person can make a big difference. So people complain about, well, why do I have to go first? Well, you're doing this for you. Maybe you have to go first, but the result is going to be a happy, healthy relationship. It's going to benefit you. This is why we do this. We're not sacrificing for the other person, but we are taking charge and responsibility of our own self and our own adult. So get yourself to the middle, whatever it takes, and you will see the dance will change. It has to, because you won't be a child anymore. So I'd love to have the second breakout room here that you can go back with the same person, hopefully, and talk about now that you've pegged yourself in a quadrant, how can you take specific steps to get back to the middle, knowing which direction you need to go? Um, the what I like to do is a 10% rule. How can I be 10% more humble? How can I be 10% less controlling? How can I be 10% more empowered? Or how can I be 10% more vulnerable, right? Whatever direction we're coming, whether it's down or up or in or over, right? 10%. We can't change overnight, be a completely different person, but we can make a new choice in that moment. And sometimes it's too intimidating to try to do something completely different. So just 10%. What would that look like? That's doable. So I want you to go into your breakout rooms again. It'll be another 6 minutes and specifically say out loud to the other person what you can do today with that action step. Whatever steps you're taking to get to the middle, at least a 10% shift or change. Welcome back, everyone. But that one was a interesting conversation, and I'm going to have time for some sharing or questions at the end. We're almost done. We have one more thing to do, which I know you've all been dying to do. Put your partner on the quadrants. Which one do you think your partner does? Well, who is their adaptive child? The elitist, the downtrodden, the controller, or the codependent? Pick one. And maybe they have a 1-2, but the one they spend the most time in. For me, I spend the most time in my codependent until I'm there too long, and then I go up to the elitist, and then I recognize, and I'm like, oh, and then I come back. And so that's generally my pattern. So pick the one that you spend the most time in, that you go to most often. But now for your partner, circle wherever they end up on the quadrant. And this is the last thing. Ready? The more is what Terry calls it, because what we're used to doing is just doing what our adaptive child does. So less boundaries, one down, more, okay, it's my fault. I have to keep going. I have to take on all the responsibility. I'm just going to do that more and more and more and more. But well, what if I have a partner now who is boundaryless and one up, they are controlling and use their anger to control and want me to be fully responsible for everything. Well, I take full responsibility for everything. So now the more that I take all the responsibility and act like a victim and have no power, the more that my partner is going to take more power and make me have more responsibility. And so it actually, when we go into our adaptive child, our tendency is to just do it more. And then our partner gets triggered and it doesn't feel good for them, so they do theirs more. And especially when you get into, like, you have one walled off and one boundaryless, the boundaryless person's going to be banging on the wall of the walled off person, which is going to trigger them to want to go even more behind their wall, right? And then so it just, usually we end up in these cycles where we're doing more of our adaptive child, which prompts our partner to do even more of theirs. It doesn't work. It just gets worse and worse and worse. So I have a really cool little thing to illustrate that. I have a Chinese finger trap. No, it's so funny. I have my 10-year-old ran in, she saw I ordered a bunch of these on Amazon. So she opened it up and was like, cool, I know these. And then she's like, hey, wait, I forgot. How do I get out? Wait, mom, help. She was stuck. And I was like, exactly. That's my point that I'm trying to make here. If we keep doing the same thing, we keep going more adaptive child, more adaptive child, more walled off, more boundaryless, we are stuck in the pattern. We're stuck in the dysfunction. It's never going to work. We have to go toward the middle, toward each other, all the way toward each other, so we can get out of the trap. That's how it works. That's the only way to get out of it. Now, my daughter's friend was over and she also stuck her fingers in and she's like, family dysfunction rolls from one generation to the next like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path, until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to the ones that come before and spares the generations that follow. That's my favorite quote by him. Imagining the dysfunction from your families of origin, the anger, the silence, the neglect, the emptiness, the loneliness, the abuse, whatever it is, it has been going on for generations. And it will continue. If we just keep doing the same things over and over, it's going to continue. So I invite you to be the one to turn and face the flames. And it's not easy because you're going to get burned. But if you don't, you're going to be consumed by the fire. And so will your family. So will your children. I invite you to be a cycle breaker. There is a lot of people in this world that are waking up to realize we need to be cycle breakers. We need to stop the dysfunction that has been going on for so long. We're ready to do something different. And there's a lot of us out there. And I've been coaching amazing couples that have a lot of trauma, but are choosing to do the work. And it's a moment to moment choice to do something different, to turn and face the flames and say no more. So it's not about who's right, who's wrong, who's bad, who's not. It's the dysfunctional cycle that needs to be broken by doing something different. And so I invite you all to become a cycle breaker. Let's stand up with love against the dysfunction. And I have a small group that is going to be continuing to support anyone who wants to work with these concepts from Terry Real. You can join as a single or as a couple. And it's in November, and you can go on my website, which Myrna will post on there, into the small group section and click on the Fierce Intimacy small group. So don't try to do this alone. There is plenty of people here and around to support. There's a lot of cycle breakers, and we can link arms together to stop the flames and protect our children from them. And so, again, I am just honored and grateful that all of you have shown up today. And I can't wait to hear about your stories and how you break the cycle.